The wind swept endlessly across the vast Mongolian steppe, carrying with it the cries of horses and the scent of the earth. Life here was merciless, only the strong endured, and the Mongols understood this truth better than any other people on earth. Their survival depended on strength, endurance, and unity. From these harsh conditions emerged a belief that the power of the tribe could be forged not only through conquest, but through blood itself. The Mongols believed that greatness was not simply learned or trained, it was inherited. Among them spread an ideology that the strength of their future generations could be shaped through deliberate unions. Warriors who proved themselves in battle were not rewarded with gold or land. Their true reward was the right to pass their blood forward. A victorious soldier, hardened by countless campaigns and known for his courage, would be matched with women from tribes renowned for their endurance. These women had survived brutal winters, long migrations, and enemy raids. To the Mongols, such women were not merely survivors, they were vessels of strength, capable of birthing children as unyielding as the steppe itself. These marriages were not romantic choices, but calculated acts of tribal strategy. Every union was seen as a blending of power, the merging of muscle, will, and instinct. Families celebrated such arrangements not for love, but for legacy. The birth of each child symbolized another link in the chain of the empire's survival. The Mongols saw human life as a resource, much like horses or herds, to be nurtured, improved, and strengthened for the good of the horde. Elders often told stories of how certain bloodlines produced warriors of unmatched skill, sons who rode before they could walk, who could endure hunger and cold without complaint, who could fight from horseback for days without rest. These tales became lessons for the tribes that strength was born from strength. Weakness, on the other hand, was seen as a threat to the tribe's very existence. Those who could not keep up with the brutal demands of nomadic life were quietly left behind, their names fading from memory. Over time, this ideology shaped every layer of Mongol society. From common herders to the highest clans, all understood that breeding was not just about family, it was about the future of the nation. A mother's duty was not only to raise a child, but to forge one. She was expected to feed him raw endurance through struggle, to teach him resilience through hardship. A father's role was to pass on courage and discipline to raise a son who would one day ride into battle without fear, or a daughter strong enough to survive the same brutal steppe life. The results of this philosophy became visible across generations. The Mongols grew into a race of horsemen unmatched in stamina and ferocity. Their soldiers could ride for hundreds of miles without stopping, live off the land with minimal supplies, and fight under impossible conditions. Their bodies were lean, their reflexes sharp, and their will unbreakable. This was not an accident, it was the product of deliberate generations of selection, a silent system that shaped their very biology. To outsiders, the Mongols appeared almost superhuman. European chroniclers wrote in awe and fear of the riders who seemed born from the wind, immune to fatigue, striking with inhuman precision. But behind that power lay centuries of survival instincts, a people who had learned to refine their own bloodline for endurance and domination. The belief that strength could be bred, that the future could be shaped through selective unions, gave the Mongols a strange kind of immortality. Every new warrior born under the endless sky carried not only the blood of his ancestors but their deliberate design. Through generations, the ideology of selective breeding became one of the silent forces behind the greatest empire the world had ever seen. An empire that conquered through will, discipline, and the belief that strength, like the wind of the steppe, should never die. The Mongol conquests reshaped not only the map of the world but also the very composition of the human race across Eurasia. Wherever their armies rode, they left behind a legacy far more complex than destruction and fear. Beneath the surface of their ruthless campaigns lay a deeply strategic vision, a belief that the power of the empire could grow not only through conquest, but through the blood of those they conquered. When the Mongols swept across Asia and into Europe, they did not always exterminate the people they defeated. Instead, they often absorbed them. This was not mercy, but calculation. Genghis Khan and his successors understood that strength came in many forms, not only in the sword arm of a warrior, but in the endurance of farmers, the craftsmanship of artisans, and the knowledge of scholars. To build a world-spanning empire, they needed not a single race, but a fusion of all the best traits humanity could offer. In Mongol ideology, the conquered were not simply subjugated, they were potential resources of strength. Tribes with fierce warriors, women known for resilience, or communities that excelled in specific crafts were deliberately integrated into Mongol society. Where other conquerors destroyed what they could not control, the Mongols preserved what could be useful. A skilled blacksmith, a strong herdsman, or a fearless horseman was far more valuable alive than dead. The same applied to women, particularly those from hardy, self-sustaining cultures. They were seen as capable of producing offspring who could inherit a mixture of desirable traits: endurance, intelligence, loyalty, and adaptability. Across the steppes and beyond, this policy created an empire unlike any other one, bound not by ethnicity, but by purpose. From China to Persia, from the Rus lands to Central Asia, the Mongols gathered people of countless backgrounds and blended them into the lifeblood of their dominion. A soldier from the Caucasus might ride beside a Turkic warrior, commanded by a Mongol general and supplied by Chinese engineers. The diversity of their forces became a weapon in itself. Behind this inclusivity, however, was a cold, strategic logic. The Mongols sought to harness the strongest human qualities wherever they found them. Their leaders believed that by merging the hardiest of the conquered with their own nomadic blood, they could produce generations of superior people, stronger, more adaptable, and better suited to survival in both war and peace. In this way, assimilation was not only political, but biological. When a city fell, the Mongols often divided its population by skill and potential. The weak, sickly, or unskilled were left behind, while the healthiest and most capable were transported across the empire. Families were separated, not by cruelty alone, but to ensure their integration into Mongol communities. A captured artisan might be given a Mongol wife. A strong woman from a conquered tribe might be placed with a proven soldier. Each pairing was designed to strengthen the collective body of the nation. These practices had far-reaching consequences. Within a few decades, Mongol society had become an intricate web of ethnic and cultural diversity. Children born of mixed heritage, half Mongol, half Turkic, Persian, Chinese, or Russian, filled the ranks of armies, workshops, and courts. This new generation possessed a blend of endurance, intelligence, and adaptability that perfectly served the needs of a nomadic empire ruling a sedentary world. Such assimilation also played a psychological role. By integrating conquered peoples through marriage and family, the Mongols created loyalty through blood ties. A man who married into the Mongol fold was no longer merely a subject, he was family. His children carried Mongol lineage, binding his future to the empire's destiny. Through blood, the Mongols erased divisions that swords alone could not. Genghis Khan himself set the example. He welcomed into his service men from many conquered tribes, Turks, Uyghurs, Tanguts, and even defeated enemies who had once sworn to destroy him. What mattered was not where they came from, but their ability and loyalty. This mindset extended to his vision of humanity. The empire was to be built from the strongest elements of all peoples. The Khan's personal lineage, spread across continents through diplomacy, alliance, and marriage, embodied this very principle. Mongol women, too, played a crucial role in this silent empire of blood. They were not hidden or confined as in many other cultures of the time. They managed households, oversaw trade, and often governed territories while their husbands rode to war. When captives were introduced into these households, they became part of this dynamic system, sometimes as wives, sometimes as servants, sometimes eventually as equals. Over time, distinctions blurred. The children of these unions did not grow up as outsiders, but as Mongols, inheritors of both the steppes' resilience and the skills of the civilizations their fathers had conquered. As the empire expanded, so did this genetic mosaic. In Central Asia, Mongol blood mixed with Turkic tribes, giving rise to new dynasties and cultures that would dominate for centuries. In Persia, the Ilkhanate blended Mongol and Persian traditions, producing rulers who spoke Persian, practiced Islam, and yet traced their ancestry to Genghis Khan. In China, the Yuan dynasty embodied this synthesis on a massive scale, where Mongol rulers relied on Chinese administrators, intermarried with local elites, and absorbed aspects of Confucian governance. The long-term outcome of this integration can still be traced in genetic studies today. Modern researchers estimate that as many as 16 million men across Eurasia carry the Y chromosome lineage associated with Genghis Khan and his immediate descendants. But beyond this single line, the broader Mongol genetic footprint stretches from Eastern Europe to the Pacific, evidence of how deeply the empire reshaped human populations. This diversity was also reflected in their armies and administration. Mongol generals could command forces where no two soldiers spoke the same native tongue, yet all understood the code of obedience and discipline that defined their empire. Their adaptability, drawn from the mixing of so many peoples, made them impossible to predict and even harder to defeat. The Mongols had, in effect, engineered not only the largest empire in history, but one of the most genetically diverse and militarily efficient populations ever assembled. Through captive integration, the Mongols turned conquest into creation. Every campaign that brought new peoples under their rule added not only land and wealth, but blood, new traits, new strengths, new ideas. Their empire became a living organism, constantly evolving through the fusion of conquered and conqueror. By the time the empire began to fragment in the late 13th century, the legacy of this integration was irreversible. From Russia to China, from Persia to India, countless families carried traces of Mongol ancestry. The blending of bloodlines had created a genetic echo that would resonate through history. What began as a pragmatic decision to use the conquered rather than destroy them became one of the most enduring strategies of the Mongol age. They had discovered a truth long before science could prove it, that diversity is strength, and that an empire built from many peoples can outlast the memory of any single tribe. The Mongols conquered by the sword, but they endured through blood, not pure, not singular, but mixed, strong, and enduring. In the endless steppe winds, their legacy still whispers a reminder that the might of an empire can be born not just from war, but from the merging of humanity itself. In the vast sweep of Mongol history, no figure looms larger than Genghis Khan, a man who saw not only the conquest of land as power, but the conquest of blood itself. His vision extended far beyond battlefields. For Genghis Khan, lineage was empire. Through his bloodline, he sought to bind nations, tribes, and entire generations into one enduring chain of loyalty and strength. It began with a belief that the greatness of a leader should not die with him. Genghis Khan viewed his descendants as living extensions of his will, carriers of his power, his instincts, and his authority. Wherever his armies rode, they left not only ruins and submission but offspring, heirs of mixed heritage who would root Mongol influence in every corner of the known world. This practice was not mere indulgence, it was deliberate statecraft. Genghis Khan understood that dynasties crumble when loyalty ends with the sword, but kinship blood could weave invisible bonds that no rebellion could easily break. By fathering children with women from conquered tribes and noble families, he ensured that local rulers had direct family ties to his own lineage. These children, raised as Mongols, were symbols of both conquest and unity, part of their mother's people, yet loyal to their father's empire. His sons and grandsons continued this policy with precision. Across Central Asia, Persia, China, and Eastern Europe, the descendants of the great Khan intermarried strategically with local elites. Each marriage was an alliance, each child a living treaty. Bloodlines that once belonged to rivals became extensions of the Mongol throne. Princes of conquered kingdoms became brothers-in-law. Daughters of vanquished rulers became mothers to Mongol heirs. The empire thus grew not only through warfare, but through generations of interwoven ancestry. This deliberate diffusion of the Khan's lineage had immense consequences. It created a ruling class tied together by heritage rather than geography, a vast network of relatives whose loyalty stemmed not from politics alone, but from blood. Even after the empire fragmented into separate khanates, this kinship network allowed Genghis Khan's descendants to maintain authority for centuries. The Ilkhans in Persia, the Chagatai rulers in Central Asia, the Yuan emperors in China, and the Golden Horde in Russia all traced their legitimacy to him. The biological result of this elite lineage program was equally profound. Modern genetic studies reveal that around 1 in every 200 men alive today carries a Y chromosome traceable to Genghis Khan or his immediate male descendants. This staggering statistic is not just a scientific curiosity, it is a testament to the scale and success of his strategy. His bloodline, intentionally multiplied and scattered, became one of the most dominant genetic legacies in human history. Through his vision, Genghis Khan turned lineage into an empire-building tool. He conquered lands with the sword, but he conquered centuries through his descendants. Where other rulers left monuments of stone, he left monuments of flesh and blood, living legacies that carried his name, his spirit, and his power far beyond his lifetime. His empire eventually faded, but his blood did not. It flowed on, quietly shaping kingdoms, families, and nations, the eternal echo of a man who understood that to rule the world, one must first rule its future generations. Life on the Mongolian steppe was a test from the moment a child was born. There were no comforts, no safety, and no softness in a land where survival itself was an achievement. From infancy, Mongol children were shaped by the same harsh winds and endless horizons that had forged their ancestors. This environment did not allow weakness, it demanded strength, discipline, and resilience beyond measure. A Mongol child's education began long before words. They learned balance on horseback almost as soon as they could stand. By the age of 3, many could ride alone across open plains, controlling ponies with nothing but instinct and command. The horse became their second body, a living extension of their will. Every Mongol child, boy or girl, grew up knowing that without their horse, they were incomplete. This unity of human and animal would later define the terrifying speed and coordination of Mongol armies, whose riders could maneuver, shoot, and kill while galloping full stride. Daily life was an unending lesson in endurance. Children woke before dawn to tend herds in freezing winds. Food was simple, dried meat, fermented milk, or whatever the family could hunt or gather. Comfort was considered weakness. They learned to survive on scarcity, to endure hunger, thirst, and exhaustion without complaint. When blizzards swept across the plains, they learned to shelter under horses or use animal hides for warmth. Each challenge carved into them a deeper resilience, a capacity to survive where others would perish. Discipline was not imposed by force but by necessity. Every mistake, a lost animal, a fire left untended, a moment of carelessness could mean death for the entire family. Responsibility came early. Even children were expected to contribute to the tribe's survival, to obey orders, and to think like warriors. By adolescence, the Mongols were already hardened fighters. They could ride for days without rest, live off the land with minimal supplies, and endure conditions that would break ordinary soldiers. Their muscles were built not in training camps, but through daily survival. Their courage was born not in battle, but in the struggle of life itself. This brutal upbringing created the foundation of the Mongol Empire's military supremacy. The warriors who later thundered across Asia and Europe were not trained to be strong, they had never known weakness. They were the living embodiment of the steppe, fast, fierce, unbreakable, and free. Across the Mongol Empire, the process of building warriors began long before a child picked up a bow. Historical traditions suggest that the Mongols established specialized camps where military training and population growth were deliberately intertwined. These were not mere settlements, they were living systems designed to sustain an unbroken line of fighters who would carry the empire's dominance forward. Within these camps, young men and women from the warrior class were carefully matched. The goal was not simply marriage or companionship, but the creation of strong, disciplined families that would raise the next generation of soldiers. Every union was seen as a contribution to the empire's future army. Children born in these environments grew up surrounded by the rhythm of warfare, hearing the clash of weapons, the whistling of arrows, and the disciplined drills that defined Mongol life. Training began almost as soon as a child could walk. Boys learned to ride, shoot, and hunt. Girls learned endurance, mobility, and survival skills. Physical and mental toughness were instilled early. They were taught that loyalty to the Khan and the tribe came before everything, even before family. The elders and trainers ensured that each generation was stronger, faster, and more disciplined than the last. These camps served as engines of both population and power. While wars took countless lives, the camps ensured a steady supply of new warriors ready to replace the fallen. In this way, the Mongols transformed their society into a perpetual military machine, one that could recover from massive losses and continue expanding across continents. By fusing family life with military discipline, the Mongols created not only armies but a culture of strength. Every child born in these camps was destined for the saddle, the bow, and the endless horizon of conquest. The legacy of the Mongols did not vanish with the collapse of their empire. Long after their cities crumbled and their banners disappeared from the winds of Asia, something far more enduring remained: their blood. The story of the Mongol expansion is not only one of military conquest and empire building, but of biological influence. Across the vast lands once ruled by Genghis Khan and his descendants, his bloodline continued to shape history in ways few conquerors could have imagined. Modern genetic research has revealed that up to 16 million men across Eurasia carry a Y chromosome pattern linked to Genghis Khan or his immediate male lineage. That is roughly 1 in every 200 men alive today. Such a statistic is staggering, not merely as a number, but as a reflection of how power, lineage, and deliberate expansion became part of Mongol statecraft. What began as a vision of unity through kinship evolved into a genetic legacy that spans from the borders of Europe to the shores of the Pacific. This golden bloodline, as later generations called it, symbolized the merging of political dominance and biological immortality. Genghis Khan did not view his descendants as simple heirs. He saw them as extensions of his rule, living branches of a dynasty meant to outlast kingdoms and empires. Every marriage arranged, every alliance sealed through offspring, was a step toward ensuring that his blood, his essence, would flow through the veins of the future world. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, His descendants continued to expand this lineage consciously. The empire was divided among his sons and grandsons, but all ruled under the shadow of his name. The Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China were all branches of one vast family tree. This shared ancestry gave legitimacy to their rule. No matter how far the empire stretched or how different its people became, they were united by blood. Each ruler traced his authority not through conquest alone, but through descent, a sacred connection to the great Khan himself. Marriage became both diplomacy and destiny. Mongol princes and princesses married into royal families of China, Persia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. These unions were strategic, binding nations not just through treaties but through family. A Mongol daughter might marry a Persian noble. A Mongol prince might take a Chinese or Turkic wife. Their children embodied the fusion of worlds, carrying the steppes' fierce independence and the sophistication of settled civilizations. In this way, the golden bloodline expanded silently across borders, blending into countless cultures while retaining its mythic identity. Centuries later, this deliberate spread of lineage left a visible mark on history. In regions once touched by the Mongol Empire, dynasties arose that claimed descent from Genghis Khan as proof of divine right. In Central Asia, noble families bore titles such as Ture and Chingisid, asserting their connection to the Khan's line. The Timurids, who later built a new empire under the conqueror Tamerlane, traced their legitimacy through marriage ties to the descendants of Genghis. Even the Mughal emperors of India, including the great Akbar and Aurangzeb, claimed ancestry from both Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, intertwining Mongol and Persian bloodlines to rule one of the most powerful empires in Asia. The influence of the golden bloodline was not limited to kings and warriors. It shaped entire populations. As Mongol rule encouraged intermarriage and assimilation, their genetic presence spread widely through Central Asia, Mongolia, northern China, parts of Russia, and beyond. The legacy of the steppe horsemen became embedded in the very DNA of the continents they conquered. Modern geneticists studying populations across Eurasia consistently find traces of Mongol ancestry in regions thousands of miles apart, a living reminder of how the Mongols reshaped the human landscape as much as the political one. But the power of the golden bloodline was not only genetic, it was psychological. Among Mongol descendants, the name of Genghis Khan carried an almost sacred weight. It symbolized authority, courage, and divine favor. To claim descent from him was to inherit legitimacy, a connection to a man believed to have been chosen by heaven itself. Even after the Mongol Empire fragmented, the reverence for his lineage persisted. In Mongol culture, oral histories, epic poems, and clan records preserved the memory of who descended from whom. Lineage was identity, ancestry was power. This reverence for ancestry also influenced social hierarchies. Those who could prove descent from the Khan's family often occupied positions of prestige or leadership, while others showed loyalty through service to the descendants of the great Khan. The bloodline became a social institution, a unifying myth that held the Mongol world together, even in times of division. Over the centuries, as the Mongol states dissolved and new nations rose, the direct political influence of the Chingisid line faded. Yet the symbolic power of the golden bloodline endured. In the 16th and 17th centuries, rulers from Central Asia to Siberia still invoked Genghis Khan's name to justify authority. The Kazakh Khans, the Bukhara emirs, and many steppe leaders maintained that only a Chingisid could rightfully rule. The echo of that belief persisted for generations, the idea that true leadership was something written in the blood. Today, science has confirmed what legend long suggested. Studies in population genetics have mapped a distinctive Y chromosome pattern originating in Mongolia around the time of Genghis Khan's life. Its spread coincides almost perfectly with the geographic boundaries of the empire. The scale of its presence indicates not random chance, but intentional propagation, a biological footprint of empire. What the Mongols did through strategy, marriage, and expansion has survived as a genetic reality nearly 8 centuries later. The story of this legacy is not only about the Khan himself, but about the extraordinary system he created, one where power was perpetuated through both policy and biology. His vision combined the nomadic idea of kinship with the political genius of empire building. By spreading his lineage across nations, he ensured that even when Mongol rule ended, the Mongols themselves never truly disappeared. They became part of everyone absorbed into the blood of Eurasia, reborn in new peoples and new empires. In many ways, this is the ultimate victory of Genghis Khan's design. His empire fell to time, but his blood endured. It transcended borders, languages, and faiths, weaving itself into the human fabric of continents. Every man who carries his genetic signature, every family that unknowingly bears his trace, is a silent continuation of his vision, the belief that strength, unity, and destiny could be passed through generations. The golden bloodline was more than heritage. It was the invisible empire that never died. While cities fell and dynasties faded, his lineage lived on in faces, in names, in unbroken genetic memory. Centuries after his death, Genghis Khan still rules in the quietest, most profound way possible, not through armies or conquest, but through the blood of millions who carry a fragment of his legacy beneath their skin.